when my kids are really willing to go there with their pain, even if it quote unquote might feel like it's directed towards me, I know that that is a desperate cry for relationship. And that only happens in vulnerability.
Okay, so I want to go back to something you said. I thought this was so profound. This sense of, in a moment, this supernatural rescuing that you felt, Psalm 18 moment. For our listeners who may be longing for that moment, how did you position yourself to receive that? How did you basically how did you get ready for that? How did you make it happen? Obviously, it's all the work of God, but I think we have got a lot of listeners that would say, "Boy, I'm waiting for that. Tell me how."
Yeah, well, there was a lot of just crying out to God, like, "Are you there?" You read Psalms, and I love how vulnerable and tender and raw it is. And I think if David was a man after God's heart, a friend of God, and he did not withhold the anguish, then I think part of why we don't see almost the God's just swoop down is that we don't show him enough of our desperation, possibly, or at least we still feel like we have to kind of button it up for him. And there is this sense of God, like you're alone are going to do this. And here's the thing. I do think in the area of mental health, it's touchy because there are resources out there that can help us in the interim. There are medications, there are therapies, there are things we can do. And sometimes, as well-meaning as those things are, they can actually keep us from a place of desperation. And it is in the desperation, like where like, apart from you, I am nothing. This will not actually, I might have maintenance plan. I might have coping mechanisms, but I'm not going to have deliverance and healing. And those are two different things.
Wow. And
so part of it for me is I did not go on medication, not because I was trying to prove something, but because I'm a firstborn type A control freak. And I had a little adverse reactions to medication when I had my 3 C-sections. It did make me anxious. It made me want to literally run from the building. That was my only history. I just felt out of body and I didn't like feeling out of control with the certain medication I was given. So I was like, oh, no, we're going to fight this, right? We're going to fight this naturally. And I'll never forget, after a year, I finally said to Gabe, I said, I'll go on whatever medication I need to go on because I'm not functioning as a mother or as a wife or as a friend or as a human. And it was literally in that season where I surrendered even my will of how I wanted to fix this thing, that God then intervened within the next week. And I wonder if it was just his way of going like, do you trust me? If it did require medication or it didn't, like, you don't always get to be the one who authors the healing journey. In the end, I never did go on medication, but I did humble myself and I did get desperate. And I did say, Lord, it's you. You are Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals, El Roi, the God who sees. Do not hide your face from me. And I just think he's okay. I really do believe he's okay with that kind of gut level honesty.
Why do you think we're scared of that? Because you see that in the scriptures. I mean, you see Jacob wrestle with God till he gets a blessing. You see David do that time and time again. Why do you think we're resistant to that?
Because we still haven't come to know the height, the depth, the breadth, the width of the love that he has for us. We still operate as orphans, which is why I brought on freedom, because we almost feel like he is a conditional God and that we have to perform for love, which is why we can't talk back, why we can't wrestle or argue, why we can't reveal our real tensions or our longings or our loss. I've had seasons even since then where I'll walk with the Lord and be like, I'm angry right now. And I think part of it's directed at you. And here's why. I'm not saying it's right or fair, but it is true. It's true to where I am right now. And I know that your mercy covers this and you will actually, through your word, through your spirit, reveal to me the things I'm not seeing. So it's still a reverential awe of God. I never want to communicate that we just are callous and cavalier with how we worship are the almighty creator, but he also is such an intimate father. And as a mother, when my kids are really willing to go there with their pain, even if it quote unquote might feel like it's directed towards me, I know that that is a desperate cry for relationship. And that only happens in vulnerability, and vulnerability will always cost you something. And so I think the Lord's like, hey, I made myself vulnerable to you. I need you in relationship to make yourself vulnerable to me, with an understanding and a submission that I am God and you are not. But I do not want you to withhold the torment that you're carrying, because that wasn't a burden that you were meant to carry.
That's so good. Okay, so since that moment, everything been perfect?
Oh, just absolutely perfect, as one could always imagine. We've arrived.
Walk us through that.
Yeah, I think in general, it's like anything. It's like when the serpent goes to Eve, did God really mean? It's like the tempter is one who always elicits doubt. And so the more I would teach, and the more prophetic and bold, and we would have like legit after teaching, I would just invite people up for prayer for just healing of anything, all kinds of mental disorders, physical disorders, laying on of everyone was just kind of all in. And I was like, I'm not promising anything. God does what he does and he wills what he wills. But I know it is in his nature for us to be whole. And so I know that we can pray according to that, trusting his timing and his provision. And we saw so many signs and wonders in the next 7 years. Like, we just saw so many people walking free of afflictions. And of course, with that came, I think the enemy doesn't like that, because once you have the power of testimony in Revelation 12:11, the enemy is bound by two things, Christ's blood and our testimony, because they did not love their lives more than death. And it's this idea of like, you're kind of like the blind man who goes, I don't know, guys, I once was blind and now I see, maybe he's the son of God. He had no reason to hide that story or be shy or shrink back about it, because he was transformed in such a way that, I just shared, like, God made me a chronic oversharer from birth, and then gave me a story I can't shut up about. I'm sorry. It is what it is. I'm sticking to it. And some people would be like, okay, well, that's your story. And I'm like, you're right. It is my story. But if testimony is very much meaning do it again, or so be it, then let's just shout from the rooftops as long as we can, as long as we have breath. Like, this is what God is about, and this is what his nature is. So I did feel attack when I would pray into the areas that were really just kind of storming the gates of hell, like people who were suicide survivors, or a girl was 21 and she had tried twice in the last 4 years to attempt suicide, or another woman who, called herself a whore from as long as she can remember, because that's what she was called. And then she just made agreement with that and slept around. And like, there were certain prayer sessions where I could just feel like I need a covering. I'm vulnerable. Everyone does. Everyone needs a covering that's like praying into these things. And then just the weight and the burden of that. So constantly I would just come around men and women that could just help just be that covering. And then also just continue to say, Lord, your yoke is easy and light. And God just said, if I call you to be light, I will make it feel light. And I don't care how dark it is. Like, even Mother Teresa, when she got that second call within the call to the slums of Calcutta, she still had an indescribable joy, because it was Christ himself who says, my yoke is easy and light. And if you're going to be a bringer of light, I will keep it light. And so that helped me go, I'm not the savior. I'm not the one that's like doing this stuff. I'm just a messenger. And God will help withstand those areas of temptation, doubt, fear. But honestly, the only way that I keep those things at bay still today, after 8 years, 9, 10 years, whatever year we are. Yeah, 10 years, is a real kind of consecration to try to stay away from the things that will start to become lies, that will just tempt me into doubt, and that just making sure that my time with God is just more prevalent than time online, time listening to other voices, time reading other books, I just have to stay in the current of the source himself so that the abundance can flow from there. Otherwise, I get off track.